Perfect. All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. We're going to be going over fair housing and discrimination laws for Oregon landlords specifically. Let's see. Nothing but a blue screen. Yeah, you should be able to see my shared slide, which is the title screen. The background is blue, so it's kind of weird. We can change the slide real quick and make sure you guys are seeing it on your side. But yeah, you should be able to see that. If that's the only thing you can see, then odds are the window with my video feed is probably hidden behind it. Typically that seems to be the issue. But most importantly, if you can hear me and you can see the slides, or even follow along with the slides in the printer friendly PDF that was in the shared shared class materials folder, then that's the most important part. Actually seeing my face is the least important. All right, so thanks for attending. We're going over fair housing and discrimination laws for Oregon landlords. Excuse me. For everyone, it is free to attend this class because it is actually paid for by a grant from the city of Portland, the Portland Housing Bureau, for landlord education. That includes this class, as well as 4 other topics. We have one of the other topics is on state law SB 608, or the rent control and no cause notice reform law that went into place a few years ago. And then, of course, all the city of Portland ordinances. So there's a class on the screening, application and screening ordinance, as well as the security deposit move out, as well, and the relocation fee for their rent control limits and no cause notice stuff. So all of those are paid for free by the city of Portland. We have a couple months left in this fiscal year. So I think we've got, I want to say we have 4. Let's see here. This is April, right? So April, May. I think we only have 1, or maybe skip June. I don't remember. So may have around 4 or so left for this one. And blue side with the title Fair Housing Distributor. So yeah, that's perfect. Yep. Seeing that is exactly what you should see. Yes. So yeah, paid for by City of Portland. We have about 4 or so of those left. Maybe like one of each class topic, I would say, because we kind of rotate, we go through a rotation for all of them. But I did just get word from the city to set up our meeting, kind of planning for what all the classes and class topics and everything are going to be for the next fiscal year around. So it sounds like more than likely going to be renewing this, and you'll see new free classes that are paid for by that landlord education grant posted, starting with ones in July, the new fiscal year. I would imagine sometime in the next month, maybe 2, probably by beginning of June at the latest, but hopefully in May be able to get all those posted for the next fiscal year once we're done with our discussions with the city on exactly what they want to see within the grant and all the classes that included. So with that said, keep an eye out for that. A few of you have already jumped ahead on me, or didn't wait for me to call for the check-in. But for those of you that's education grant unfortunately does not pay for, it only pays for getting the education out. It can't technically go toward any of the costs, can't go towards providing professional licensing, continuing education credits. And so that's why those of you that wanted continuing education credits for your state of Oregon real estate agent, real estate broker, or property manager licenses, you had to actually pay extra for that. That's why, because in the fine print of that grant, we can't provide those unless we are charging extra, so that we can show that none of the grant money actually went towards providing those CE credits. So for those of you that did do that, please go ahead and do your check-in, your beginning of class check-in now. If you already did it, great. You don't have to repeat yourself, but we need at the very least your name as it appears on your license, and your license number at a minimum. Also makes things nice and easy for us if you also add your broker affiliation too. So name as it appears on your license, license number, and broker affiliation. If you could, go ahead and throw that in the regular just webinar chat window. And we have Patrick here as our manager with for the Portland Area Rental Owners Association, that is monitoring the chat, monitoring all those check-ins as well. And then we'll have another one at the end of the class too. I would imagine by now you're all used to that, getting CEs through a virtual basis like this. Excuse me. All right. I think that is pretty much the gist of it. Yeah, I see a lot of those check-ins going in. Perfect. Let's see here. Oh, nice. So those of you like Sandy B, who kind of just put a generic kind of introduction of who you are in there in the chat, that is great. Definitely, guys, you can use the chat for chatting amongst yourselves. With that said, just make a little note, Sandy. One thing you did is you sent that message just to host and panelists. I think you might have meant to send it to everyone in the class. Can introducing yourself. Right above where you guys type in your message for the chat should be a drop-down menu where you can select who specifically sees it. One of those options being everyone, so everyone attending to be able to see it. Okay, let's jump into it. This is our wonderful liability disclaimer. Since all of you have access to that PDF of the nice black and white printer friendly version of all of these slides in the class shared class materials folder, I will assume that you will take the time to read it yourself, and you do not need to listen to me read this to you word for word out loud. There we go. The biggest gist of it, though, is that that I am not an attorney. We are not establishing a attorney-client relationship today, nor am I giving any official legal advice, since I'm not officially qualified to do so. I am, of course, giving you my interpretation of the laws that apply for the class topic today. I wear a lot of hats, one of which is I've owned, started out as I owned Coldwell Banker Mountain West Property Management down in Salem originally. Now I own IRC Real Estate and Property Management, where we operate out of the greater Portland metro area. As far south as about Albany, Corvallis, as well as have offices in Central Oregon, kind of Bend, Redmond, Lapine area as well. Been doing that for, gosh, almost 10 years now. I want to say, I think it's like September or October will be about 15 years. It'll be about 15 years. Excuse me. I've been teaching continuing education classes for landlords around 12, 13 of those years as well. I'm chair of the rental services committee for the city of Portland and the Portland Housing Bureau, president of the Portland Area Rental Owners Association, president of the Real Estate Investor the Northwest Real Estate Investor Association, as well as the Central Oregon one. And so I wear a lot of hats, obviously. None of that is that of an attorney. And so one thing I do always say to people, if you are a landlord, treat knowing what attorney you're going to call just like knowing what emergency plumber you're going to call in the middle of the night. Hopefully you never ever need to use them, but you probably should do a little bit of the legwork on the front end to find out who you're going to call if you do need them. There are plenty of times when it comes to landlord tenant law that there's gray area, or maybe it's to where it's not 100% clear exactly how you should handle it, or maybe the not temperament, but the kind of which way judges in that county seem to be leaning at times might change how the best way to handle that situation. Or just you're human, maybe something happened, you let your emotions get the best of you in the response that the way you responded to the tenant, and you're worried that might have hurt your ability to actually evict them or do whatever it is that you're trying to do. So know who you're going to call ahead of time, because it may, in those situations, it might be worth it to spend $300 to $500 on officially consulting with an attorney to make sure you're proceeding properly. Let's see here. So quick questions in the chat. As far as the recording of the class, within about a day or so, Patrick should, with Portland Area Rental Owners Association, should be able to send out a follow-up email to everyone, may even be later today, that has a link to be able to access the class recording. I think you get access to it. I think you get, it's like 1 or 2, I think it's like 2 weeks, something like that. So that way, if you need to go back and do a refresher or anything like that. Excuse me. So just keep an eye out for that. That will be coming out. let's see here. And then also, Patrick, I'm sure you're moderating the chat there. But Marianne had a question. Looks like she missed the option to be able to register with paying the extra to get the CE credits and would like to get those. So Marianne, we did see that, and I'm sure Patrick will address that and reach out to you. Let's see. So yeah, as you already did, keep doing the check-ins as though assuming we'll get it straightened out for you. Let's see. Okay. My opinions are just that. Obviously, rpmeducation.org, as well as the City of Portland Housing Bureau, and with the advertising partnership with the Portland Area Rental Owners Association, are nice enough to make sure we get this information out to you guys and put this on. Of course, the information in in the slides has been approved, but what comes out of, they can't control what comes out of my mouth. So if I say something totally crazy, don't blame any of them. With that said, in the 12, 13 years that I've been teaching these classes so far, haven't gotten ourselves anyone in trouble, so we should be okay. Also, just so note, I noticed a couple people raised their hands. With these classes, since they are free, we end up getting actually quite a few people. I think for this one today, I want to say we had somewhere around 130 to 150 pre-registered. And so that's why we actually have all of your guys' mics and videos locked in the off position because of bandwidth, plain and simple. So we try to keep everything text-based as far as you guys communicating with us. And so with that said, perfect little segue here. So with raising the hands, actually better. Typically I don't monitor that much because we're not going to turn the video or audio on unless we absolutely have to with somebody. But if you have something that is to chat amongst yourselves, if you guys, hey, I need a recommendation for this for my fellow landlords in here, since, like I said, we're expecting 120 plus. Right now, I think we're approaching 90 or so. Feel free to chat amongst yourselves in the regular webinar chat. Also, that's a good area to communicate with Patrick, who's monitoring everything and managing things for us. Like if you have questions about CE credits, if I talk about the Portland Area Rental Owners Association, and how important it is, join your local landlord support association. He'll post links in the chat for you guys. That's what you use that area for. By all means, use it. I try to ignore that as much as I can because my focus is to teach the class. And if you have questions that are on topic for me to read aloud and answer as part of the class, then that's where you'll actually use the separate Q&A section. Okay. I see already one person has already done that. Let me make sure the settings are on so you guys can view and upvote. Yep. Perfect. Since we do have a lot of people, we'll see how the volume of questions goes. Most likely with a class like this, I'm pretty detailed in all my information. So typically I'm able to cover, get through it without too many questions. But if the volume of questions gets a bit high, then I may, go a couple slides and then have a specific Q&A section, kind of separate it like that. With that said, in that Q&A window, if you go to your Zoom links bar, typically it's right next to the chat one. Instead of having one chat bubble, it has two overlapping chat bubbles. It's literally labeled Q&A. If you go in there and you open that up, you should be able to see all the questions that have been posted. I think at the top, you'll have a little menu option to also see previous questions that were asked and answered if you wanted to. But all the questions that have been asked haven't been answered yet. Review those for me before just automatically typing yours in. If you see any that are similar or the same as yours, if it's pretty much the same question that you have, then just click the thumbs up button. Okay? And the more thumbs up a question gets, the higher priority rank it gets on my side of the screen, and will be the first ones answered when I go to those Q&A sessions. Also, if it's close to yours, but your specific question is just, a little bit different, or there's a little extra bit of information you want out of that, then you should also be able to post like just kind of a follow-up comment to all the questions on there as well, to add to it if you wanted to. So please do use that Q&A section. I try to focus on that mainly, so that way when I go to answer questions, you guys don't have to sit there and listen to me in silence, be silently reading through the chat to make sure I find the things that are actual questions to answer during the class. So use that separate Q&A section, helps all of us get through this smoother. Let's see here. And like I said, yeah, use the webinar chat to communicate, have questions for Patrick or admin, and then use the separate Q&A section to type in any questions that are on topic for me to read as part of the class, read and answer as part of the class. I always stick around after the class. For these, it depends on the number of questions we get. More than likely, we will typically these classes were done closer to an hour and a half than taking the full 2 hours. But even if we take the full 2 hours, I always schedule myself to stick around for at least 15 minutes after to answer any questions that are property management related, not necessarily specific to the class that was just taught. So if you do have questions that pop up in your head and you're like, that's not really on topic for a fair housing class, make a note of it and feel free to post it at the end of the class, and I'll do my best to answer them. For these, if it looks like we're going to be closer to the hour and a half mark, then I won't worry about the 5-minute break at the hour mark. Most people, for these classes that are under 2 hours, typically prefer I power through and get you done early rather than take that 5-minute break. But if we have a ton of questions and it looks like we're definitely going to take the full 2 hours, then I will go ahead and take that 5-minute break right there. Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Thank you, Patrick. Okay. Let's see. Dave asks, when is a class scheduled to address specific Portland regs? So as far as like fair housing and discrimination goes, we're talking about today, there's nothing additional at the city level yet. So if you're just talking about under today's heading, then everything that we're talking about today definitely applies in Portland, but it's not specific to Portland, and Portland at the moment doesn't have anything additional under the fair housing heading. As far as the other classes that I mentioned, I'm sure Patrick will be able to post in the chat there. You go to portlandarearoa.com or rpmeducation.org, either one of those. If you need CE credits, it's cheaper if you go through the association you're a member. But if you go there, you'll be able to see right on those pages will be the upcoming class, I think like next 5 to 10. And then you can go into the class schedule and you'll see all the ones upcoming. Like I said, we're only for the free ones, we're only scheduled through June right now, but we have already started the talks with the city on what the schedule and what they're going to approve in the grant for the next fiscal year, which would start in July. So we should have those posted soon. But yeah, and then also, of course, in addition to all these free ones that are paid for by the city of Portland, we also have, gosh, I think, I don't know, I want to say at least three to five additional classes every month that, oh darn. The mediation, the flyer has the wrong phone number on it. Oh, Sandy, I didn't realize that. Yeah, if you guys could maybe email me an updated copy, or I could see if we can edit it. But yeah, sorry about that. I'll try to get that. I'll try to make a note to get that updated too. Anyways, let's see. So yeah, we have additional classes that you would have to pay for that are an extra cost. Obviously, if you become a member of the Portland Area Rental Owners Association, that's the cheapest way to be able to do that. Attend classes that are paid ones that aren't already paid for by a city grant like this. Yeah, so go to those websites and you'll be able to find the upcoming event schedule right there. And like I said, quick cheapest way to attend the majority of my classes is by being a member. Let's see here. Yes, I know, Lindsay, trust me, I will get you out of here early no matter what. It's okay. And I still have to get through all the housekeeping stuff no matter whether we like it or not. Let's see. I think that's actually pretty much it. So good way to wrap it up. because I talked about, mentioned Peroa, mentioned the city grant like I'm supposed to, got all their information at the end. Yep, I think we're good. All right, let's jump into it. Let's see here. Angela has a question. I just want to scan it really quick, just see where I'm going to answer it. If I know I'm going to answer it in the ahead in the class. Yeah, so Angela, your question is about kind of the relocation fee ordinance in the city of Portland. So it's not on topic for today. The short answer I can give you is most likely you're probably not going to be able to avoid or get around the city of Portland relocation fee. But if you go to one of the last slides of this class, there's the Portland Housing Bureau Rental Services Office website. If you go there, they have very detailed information on that and all the exemptions that exist. So you can see if you do qualify, or of course, I believe I should be teaching a class on that coming up in the next month or so, if I remember correctly. But yeah, let's see. Okay. So for fair housing, first thing is to know what is discrimination. Yes, I know. I promise if this is your first time taking one of my classes, I do not just sit here and read everyone word for word, but when there are legal definitions, obviously you kind of have to. Discrimination legally means to discriminate against an individual is to treat someone differently, usually in a negative way due to a given characteristic. As a landlord, property manager, owner, whatever it may be, are you responsible for only your own actions? The answer, unfortunately, is no. You are basically considered a business, and you are expected basically you are responsible for anyone that that basically on your behalf communicates in any way with your tenants or potential future tenants. So it is not just you. It's, the landlords, property managers, on-site managers, leasing agents. So if you're an owner, you're responsible for all of these people. If you own the property management company that the owner hires and someone gets sued for fair housing and discrimination issues, then more than likely 9 times out of 10, both the owner and the landlord property management company is going to be listed on that lawsuit. And then, of course, anyone that you hire to work on the property on your behalf in any way. So leasing agents, contractors that are working on the property, advertisers, receptionists that you hire, literally anyone that you hire to work on your behalf. Contractors. So one of the classes that I teach, it's not one of my most popular classes, but I think I typically teach it once or twice a year. Is on doing inspections as well as managing repairs and or contractors. One of the things I talk about is that you are responsible for the contractor and their interactions with your tenants. Now, of course, if you have a licensed bonded contractor who has their own company, they will also be included on the lawsuit in addition to yourself. But so don't think that automatically absolves you from liability. Obviously, depending on the situation, you may have some sort of countersuit again or some sort of lawsuit after the fact against the contractor or something like that. But all things being said, you are responsible. So one of the things I do suggest is at the very least, have a sit down, meeting or face-to-face meeting of some kind with a contractor that you're planning on hiring. Obviously, if you've got an emergency repair, sometimes you don't have that luxury, and it is just literally, well, the first plumber that I get a hold of that says they're available today or tomorrow is who I'm using, plain and simple. I get that. What I'm talking about is like when you are, vetting contractors, repair handymen, plumbers, electricians, roofers, gutter cleaners, gutter and roof cleaners, house cleaners, landscapers, anyone like that you're going to just use on a regular basis. Make sure you have a meeting with them. I prefer to, if possible, actually to sit down and have lunch with a contractor. I'll take them out. And so and it's really, I'm not grilling them. I just want to see how they treat people. how they interact with people when they are supposed to be, you know, working in a professional setting. You know, is it the type of guy that wants to feels uncomfortable and tries to break the ice by telling some sort of, you know, racy joke, or that might that you think could definitely be offensive to if told to the wrong person, right? Or maybe you know, if you are able to take them out to lunch, great. One of the reasons I like to do that was mainly just to, and quite frankly, as a landlord, 75% of the time the contractor would end up offering to pick up the check, because, you know, they're trying to get business, but I never expected them to. I was happy to pay for them. But you get to see how they treat the, you know, the servers and the person at the front desk seating people, you know. 99% of the time, nothing to be worried about. But sometimes you'll run across those people that you can tell, like, okay, you're obviously treating this person differently for whatever reason. Or you know, it's the person that I mean, heck, you know, especially if you're in the Portland area, you know, the server that let's say, you know, helps support the Keep Portland Weird motto, right, in whatever way that may be. And the moment they walk away, the contractor makes some derogatory comments or something like that. So it's just, you know, to look out for some red flags, because they are going to be representing you. And 99% of the time, not an issue. I think in the 15 years I've been doing this, and I will say, as a landlord, running a property management company, it's always part of my job to be looking for the next handyman or contractor, because even the best ones eventually you have problems with, or are too busy because they're good, you know, whatever it may be. So I don't know how many contractors I've interviewed, I guess, or met with. I think there's only been like one where I walked away from that going, okay, apparently, you know, in the research I did in the referrals, they do good work, got decent prices, but I'm definitely never sending them to an occupied unit. That's probably only happened once. And so it's not very often, but good thing to check out. So that way you can find out, you know, okay, am I sending out someone that I do actually feel confident is going to represent me in a good way, and not, you know, do something that would get me sued. When does it apply? Advertising, screening, in your advertising, and the way that you screen, the process and order at which you screen people, as well as even just the way you order at which, and the way you respond to people that are inquiring. Advertising and screening, that whole process right there is probably where, and I'll say, you know, I teach this class with the assumption that if you guys are willing to take the time to take a class like this, you are not the people that are going to intentionally discriminate against someone. You fall into the much larger category of landlords that have a chance of accidentally or unintentionally discriminating. And for those, I would say easily, my own guesstimation, 80 to 90% or so, they make the mistakes they make are in that section, that first part, when you're advertising the unit, responding to inquiries and doing the screening, selecting who you want. That's most of the time where the mistakes happen. Also, of course, with you know, rent collection, repairs, inspections, evictions, you know, repairs. If you're for some reason, for this type of tenant, which we'll go over what all the protected classes are and stuff next, but this type of tenant of this protected class, for some reason, consistently is getting responses to repairs in you know, 3 weeks, and this tenant in this other class seems to get their repairs attended to within 1 week, you know, or something like that. Be probably a hard one for tenants to really prove at that point, but just an example of what we mean by that. Or for these types of tenants, when you do repairs, it's, you know, the cheapest possible option you can possibly go with, or, you know, even if it means slapping some duct tape on that cracked cabinet door or something. And then for these other types of tenants, You are, whenever anything breaks, you're replacing it with something that's brand new and possibly even nicer or something to that effect. Inspections could be simply, for these types of tenants, you do inspections once every 3 months. And for these types of tenants, you do inspection once every 6 months or something like that. Or, basically just treating them differently. How eager you are to pull the trigger on going to eviction. Literally all interactions that you have with tenants and potential tenants is when fair housing discrimination laws would apply. So long way to say literally everything you do, make sure you're doing, and I'll go through this in more detail later, make sure you're doing it properly and equally for everyone. So as far as protected classes go, there are different levels of protected classes. For the most part, as far as for the landlord-tenant relationship and everything, there is federal and then the state of Oregon has theirs. As it stands right now, we don't have any additional protected classes at the city level. But well, actually, no, I think in like Eugene or Corvallis or both, technically they went out of their way to make college students a protected class, if I remember correctly, for housing issues, stuff like that. So I guess I shouldn't speak so soon. I don't believe like City of Portland area or Central Oregon, where I've got offices, I don't believe any of those areas have local protected classes yet. I would not be surprised if the city of Portland passed something like that at some point, sooner than later. Quite honestly, I'm kind of surprised they haven't yet. But nonetheless, at the federal level, it's pretty much all the ones that the vast majority of people would probably be able to just rattle off the top of their head if asked. So race, color, national origin, religion, gender, or gender identity. Well, or do we actually, oh no, gender identity is a state side. Federal part, yeah, gender, familial status, which is a fun word that I'm actually now, after 12 years of teaching these classes, finally starting to pronounce properly. That's basically a way to say of what makes up your household family unit, right? So like if for some reason you said, I don't want to rent to you because it's 2 parents and 2 adult kids and their kids. That's a complicated way to put it. Or it's also familial status would be discriminated against them based on the total number of people in their unit up to a certain point, which for just a clarification, if you don't know, basically the accepted rule is, and you have to pick one of these options for the total number of people you allow in your units, and then apply that rule to all of your tenants equally, okay, across your book of business or rental properties. And that is either 2 people per bedroom or 2 people per bedroom plus 1. Within my own management company, I go on the a little bit more conservative side, because if I screw up, then I get to be sued by the tenant, and very good chance I'm also being sued by the owner as well. But it's 2 per bedroom or 2 per bedroom plus 1. So with my company, we do 2 per bedroom plus 1. And so if to make it very clear, if you have a 2-bedroom unit, then the lowest limit you can do on total occupancy would be either 4 people or 5. So 2 people for the 2 people each for the 2 bedrooms, or that plus 1, so 4 or 5. But beyond that, that's the only limitation that you're able to put on that family group or how that makes up their household. Obviously, you can't discriminate based on disability or active duty military personnel. Landlords that would actually want to discriminate against active duty military personnel, definitely not common in Oregon, since we really don't have many military bases here. There are things like areas over in Hawaii where they do have a lot of military bases. There are some landlords that try to avoid renting to them. Not, I mean, I don't agree with them, but the reasoning is that by law they have the ability to break a lease without a lease break fee if the military decides to relocate them as part of their active duty mission. I don't know, not mission, but whatever, their contract or where employment. There you go. That'll work. Or they're sent off to actually fight or something like that. Then they do have the right to break a lease without paying a lease break fee in those situations. So active duty military personnel was added as a protected class. I also believe this came around, I want to say it was kind of early to late 70s, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong on that and mixed it up with something else. So it also kind of came out of that area to where there actually was a lot of discrimination against anyone wearing a uniform by certain parts of society. And at the state level, marital status is a protected class. Source of income, I'll come back to that one. Sexual orientation, including their gender identity, as well as domestic violence victims. Basically, you can't treat someone differently because they because of something about them that is under any one of these protected class categories. Source of income, I just want to come back to that one because that was actually, I believe that was the most recent one passed at the state level. And that was, gosh, probably about 8 years ago now, I think. Maybe it's 10. Oh, between having kids and the COVID years, I have completely lost my ability to tell how long ago things happened. Yeah, so source of income, when that was passed, what you would have actually known it as, what it was mostly in the news as and advertised as, was the Section 8 bill. And that was the bill that was passed that made it to where it didn't mean, so a lot of landlords misunderstood it. It didn't say that you have to approve anyone on Section 8. It just said you can't deny someone because their way of paying for the rent is coming from a Section 8 or government source or something like that. Basically a subsidy or however you want to label it. And so it was known as the Section 8 bill, but really what it did is just added source of income as a protected class at the state level. And so not only does it mean you can't deny someone simply because they're on Section 8, which you can still deny them for any reason you would deny any other tenant, just not because they're getting their money to pay the rent from Section 8. But also technically it made it to where if you were a landlord that maybe you decided that I never rent to anyone that is employed at a strip club. You have, who knows what reasons you may or may not have. A factual one you could have would be that, well, statistically, there's a higher crime rate and drug use, things like that around strip clubs and stuff. So I can kind of see it. Some people obviously may have, religious or moral differences with it, whatever it may be. Well, as long as they're earning their income to pay your rent from a legal source within the state of Oregon, then you can't deny them because of that specifically. Obviously, you'd have to, you can still deny them for any other of things on your screening criteria, just not where they're getting their money, as long as it's a legal source. Let's see, Catherine asks, are there some types of people unprotected, like people with a certain profession or people from a certain city? Certain people who basically by law are not protected. I don't believe so. Especially in the state of Oregon, especially in the city of Portland. Yeah, because the whole sanctuary city and sanctuary state. Because I was starting to think about, maybe illegal aliens or people, who immigrated illegally and can't prove legal citizenship and stuff. But after that era where there was all the states and cities established themselves as sanctuaries, even that's kind of gone away. And I would definitely hesitate before even discriminate against someone there. So I believe the answer is no. Yeah, I mean, technically, yeah, smokers are not protected. So, I mean, there's a ton of things that aren't protected. But as far as it being specifically stated in law that this group under this heading does not have any discrimination protections, I don't believe there are any like that. let's see. I guess one thing I would put in there is that because in general, you can't discriminate against someone because of their basically things that are health related, right? Except if they have a prescription for marijuana, that is not actually a protected right. You can actually, as a landlord, say, doesn't matter if you have a prescription or not, I don't want it, smoked, consumed, grown, harvested or processed, et cetera, on or in my rental property. You can still do that. So that might fit your category of specifically not being protected, but that'd be about it. As far as I can think of right off the top of my head. And I will say there are a couple exemptions to where technically you can legally discriminate, but we'll get to those, but they are very few and far between. So what happens if a tenant claims that you discriminated against them? Well, here's how it can get really expensive. So in most cases, there are lots of cases. Obviously, there's been, big high profile things where there's been murders, and then the person, they were taken to criminal court, and then they were also, sued by the family for wrongful death, things like that. But for the most part, as a landlord, at least, if you get in trouble, you do something wrong, and the tenant has a case against you, like you legitimately did something wrong, then it's handled just in civil court. Tenant sues you. And assuming you actually did commit whatever the violation is the tenant is claiming, then you'll have to pay for, whatever if there's a legally mandated fine for that, the tenant, plus their legal fees and any other, damages that they can prove. And then it ends there. With discrimination, though, that's not the only case. The tenant, of course, through by themselves, through an attorney, through Fair Housing Council and legal aid services, can file their own lawsuit against you as a landlord for discrimination or fair housing violations. But in addition to that, and this is where it really starts going to the point where if you accidentally discriminate against a tenant and they or BOLI, the Bureau of Labor Industry, or HUD, Housing and Urban Development, any or all of them go after you, best case scenario, and you feel like you won or got out cheap, if it only costs you about 10, in the low tens of thousands, like 10, 20 grand. But if you're a repeat offender, or you're not willing to work with them, or you really dig your heels in, or maybe it's a more of a class action thing with, it's a 50-unit complex and you unintentionally, discriminate against all of them, that's when it very easily and quickly gets up into the six-figure range, unfortunately. And so what can happen is, like I said, the tenant can sue you themselves, and BOLI and HUD can all open up investigations via the complaint from the tenant that's submitted to them, and then decide whether to possibly themselves actually sue you for those as well on top of that, and it all just stacks up. Most of the time, in most years, there is a budget for paying for shoppers, which I believe I talk about that a little bit more later. Actually, these called BOLI and or HUD have a budget to where they actually hire people to be calling you or emailing you about your rental property and seeing if you're going to discriminate in some way. But basically the budget for essentially defending tenants or going after landlords for fair housing discrimination issues typically is just given to one, BOLI or HUD. So in most cases, you're getting sued by the tenant and one of those organizations. But if it's egregious, or if for whatever reason that year they both got the budget for it, it is their law allows for, it is possible you could be getting hit from three sides for the same violation. Let's see here. Let's see, and they have one up to for normal stuff. That is also one thing that's very unique about fair housing discrimination. For normal issues for a tenant or a landlord to sue each other, you have a 1-year statute of limitations. for basically everything other than fair housing and discrimination. For that, technically, the tenant has up to 2 years to file the lawsuit against you. But BOLI and HUD, they are limited to only 1 year to bring a complaint against you. So technically, if since the event happened, 1 year has passed, then then after that you get sued by the tenant for it, then it should be beyond the statute of limitations for BOLI or HUD to also come after you for that. Let's see here, talked about cost, and that is also the other thing when it comes to discrimination. Even though I have definitely had landlords report to me that they actually had like HUD or BOLI or Shopper find something on their ad, and they reached out to them and said, hey, you need to change this, and the landlord complied and said, oh, that wasn't my intent, yes, I'll change it right away, and then no complaint or anything came of it. So the law does not specifically outline room for your defense to have anything to do with your intent, right? So this is speaking of once you're actually in court. But there have been times where a happy to comply landlord has avoided having a official complaint go through or a lawsuit because that wasn't their intent and they changed it right away. But if you end up in court, your intent isn't going to matter. All that matters is does what you did actually violate landlord tenant law? Let's see, we've got a question here. Back to discrimination due to source of income. You can decline an application. You can decline an application if they intend to pay via cash payments, right? Not really. Yeah, that would be tough. I know you can refuse to accept checks, and especially if you can have a policy like within my company where, hey, if you bounce a check, if you have a good record with us, otherwise as a tenant, then you get one mistake like that, and it's okay. But if you bounce it, if a second payment, whether it's a written check or an electronic check, they're treated the same way, bounces, then you're no longer allowed to pay via check. Technically, as a landlord, you do have room to make specific company policies around payment, stuff like that. But there is also a lot of stuff to where if a tenant showed up and wanted to pay the rent via cash, and I said I don't take cash, and then let's say that's on the 7th of the month, and their rent was due on the 8th or on the 1st, and so then the next day on the 8th, I go ahead and you file your non-payment of rent termination notice, and which FYI, so in case you didn't see, that the law has passed, been signed by the governor, non-payment of rent termination notices are 10-day notices now. Don't ask me questions on that because it's not part of this class, but we should be scheduling and putting a class on the schedule to go over that new law specifically, and have it scheduled probably a couple weeks from now, 2 to 3 weeks at most from now. So keep an eye out for that. But just so you know, if you didn't hear, that has passed. So don't be serving 72-hour notices anymore. They're needing to be 10-day. Anyways, if that next day I file a non-payment of rent termination notice, I wouldn't feel super confident about the judge upholding it when the tenant lets the judge know that, hey, on the 7th, I showed up with cash to pay them and they refused to take it. I would not advise one of my clients to go down that route. So just by going through that scenario, I would also say by extension of that I would not feel confident denying a tenant if they say they intend to pay via cash every month. If they did tell me, hey, I would like to pay via cash every month, then I would say, I understand that, but due to the safety and security of like my employees or whatever, I don't know, doesn't really matter. We would prefer if you actually used one of these payment systems to pay us, however that may be. But if for whatever reason they were like, they show up and have cash in hand to pay their rent, I wouldn't turn them away. All right. So this class, for the most part, can be summed up with these two things. So the first one seems pretty straightforward. Treat everyone the same no matter what. But I go beyond that. This is where, I mean, technically by law, if you're a landlord in Oregon, which even if you own one single family home rental that you manage yourself, you are considered to be a landlord in Oregon. Technically by law, you are supposed to have a policies and procedures manual, right? I'm sure everyone knows by law, you have to have what was I going to say? You have to have a screening criteria, right? That's required, as well as lining out what your screening process is. Like if you screen on a first come first serve basis, which if you have a rental property in Portland, it's actually required. But yeah, if you screen on a first come first serve basis, or whatever your process is, you have to have that. Well, in my opinion, in order to create a policy procedures manual, you don't need to go out, purchase try to find, which I don't believe they really exist, but try to find a, generic one that you can purchase. Really, my recommendation is you start with your screening procedures manual, right? That's your start. And then as things happen, you add to that. So if you handle a repair, or say you're doing your screening and a tenant doesn't quite qualify, but you review your stuff and you have specific reasons for why you decided I'm going to make an exception and go ahead and approve them anyway. Anytime something like that happens where you have to make a decision, type it out, write it down, add it to your policies and procedures manual. If you're old school, you like printed physical things, get a 3-ring binder, and then you can type it out, print it off, hole punch it, slide it in wherever it needs to be, use your dividers if for different sections, things like that. Obviously you can do the exact same thing just on a Word document on your computer as well, that you just continuously update as things happen, and it'll just naturally turn into your policies and procedures manual. And it makes it and it's very important, of course, if you have employees that work for you helping you manage stuff, but also just for yourself. If you're a landlord of an employee of a company with one employee, and that is you, it's also good to have that, not just because it's required, but also so that in the future, maybe, a couple of years down the road, if you have to make a very similar decision, you can flip back and go, how did I end up deciding officially to approve that person? What was it that I looked at, or whatever? Go into that policy procedures manual, pull up what you typed out after making that decision, and you're going to be protected because you can actually prove, hey, no, I've got a policy procedures manual, judge. I made this decision on this tenant today, which was the exact same reasoning I used for this tenant 2 years ago, and I made the exact same decision. That is just our policy. Sorry if the tenant doesn't like it, but it's not because of the color of their skin. It's because that's how we are. And that's also one thing. It's kind of funny, but also somewhat true, or also just true. As long as you are not discriminated against someone because of one of those protected classes, right, at the federal or state or possibly local level, as long as you're not doing that, then technically, if as a landlord, which I don't recommend this because it's not a good business practice, but as a landlord, if you want to be a jerk to your tenants, technically you can, just so long as you're the exact same level of jerk to every single tenant you've got, and you treat them all with the same. That's the main idea. I wouldn't recommend going that route. I would recommend, taking it a little more seriously and try to be the landlord that they really like and are willing to stick around a year or two longer than they would have otherwise, or something like that. But just to drive the point home, technically, you can be a difficult curmudgeon to deal with as a landlord. And as long as you're not treating them differently because of any of those protected classes, and you're treating everyone the same way. The next one, allow them to make their own decisions. You just provide the information. I've got some examples of that coming up. What this means is the best way to drive this home is really in the advertising that you do. So You want to give the data, give the information about the property, about the neighborhood, about being a tenant renting from your organization or from you as a landlord, all of that stuff. You do not want to take the next step and tell them whether or not who your property is ideal for. So that's what I mean by you just give them the information, then let them make the decision. Excuse me. You don't try to suggest the decision that they should make in one way or another. So good example of that. In your advertising, you've got this rental property that is just a couple blocks away from ABC Elementary School, which is the best elementary school in the area or the state or whatever it happens to be. Absolutely something you need to include in the advertising if this is the case. Odds are you paid a premium to purchase this rental property because of that elementary school, meaning in that district. And odds are you're probably getting, $100 extra per month than you would if that exact same unit was not in that school district, right? So of course you need to mention this. Where you would actually end up violating fair housing is obviously you mentioned that you can include quotes, like if there was an article that labeled it as the best elementary school in such and such area. You can quote those. You can have links to like the school grading websites, give them different scores, or a link to some article ranking, the top or state of Oregon elementary schools or something like that. All of that is fair game because you are just providing information. Where you cross the line and officially are violating fair housing and discrimination law is if you take the next step and say, because of this, it's ideal for families with children that are of, elementary school age, since it's within walking distance to ABC Elementary. Now, walking distance. Let's see here. Yeah, you can. Well, yeah, someone in the Q&A posted, families is a fine line, any family. It is not defined by traditional family anymore. Yeah, you're probably right. But the word families isn't the thing that I would necessarily say is a problem. I would say a good tenant attorney could probably make an argument to your statements. I wouldn't be 100% on board with the word family not possibly being a questionable word to use, but it is what it is. Those list of words I'll go over in a second, just so you know, because the word families is on there. I pulled that from the Federal Fair Housing Council's list of words you should not use in advertising. So I'll also just leave that out there as an argument. Unless it's actually removed from that list, it's definitely something a tenant attorney could reference. So I would steer clear of it. The main thing, though, is actually in my example here, and the second bullet point is really the phrase families with children. That's the part, the main part that is the issue. Because, yeah, of course, families could have many different definitions, but families with children, that's pretty straightforward. And so that's not something. The main thing is you don't want to take that next step and say it's ideal for. And it could just be that maybe it's not the best elementary school. Maybe it's a house right next to an amazing playground, or that new city park that's, perfect for kids at, preschool age or something like that. Mention the park, include pictures of the park, include a link to an article talking about how amazing this park is. Do not ever take the next step and say, because of the park being here, this unit is ideal for someone with children of the age that would be in that, or someone, that's where you'd make the extra step. And one thing I can assure you, tenants will connect the dots. If you just mention the information about the school or the park, families with children, odds are they're looking for a place in that school district because of that school already. So you tell them that all the information about the school, they get it. This unit is more ideal for them. They will take that leap. You don't have to worry about it. Or is I going with that? Yeah, so they'll connect those dots. You don't need to tell them that it will be ideal for them. They'll definitely figure it out. Also, on the flip side of that, odds are the college students are looking for a place to be able to throw a party are probably also going to read between the lines and realize like probably not this house that's right, this rental unit that's really close to this school, elementary school, probably not the best option. Not all college students are smart enough to connect those dots, but a lot will. Let's see here. Stay away from any words that directly or indirectly suggest your rental would be better or worse for one tenant versus another. That's the gist of it. You want to just give them information, let them make the decision. So these 9 are ones that I actually pulled. I kind of mentioned that list. I'm pretty sure it should still be in the shared class materials folder. I'm pretty sure I have a copy of the full list in that class materials folder. But these are the ones that jumped out to me as probably as being, most likely to be used by a landlord after reviewing that, as well as just a couple kind of funny ones for conversation's sake. So obviously, families, children, mother-in-law suite. It's an interesting one. That's also, like the one up top where I highlighted, I meant to talk about that, highlighted walking distance or bolded it. So far as I'm aware, there hasn't been a landlord that has been successfully found to violate fair housing discrimination law for using the term walking distance. But in talking to some fair housing attorneys in Oregon, they recommend not using it because they have actually seen and heard of cases in other states that have gone through for that. The idea or the assumption is that by saying it's within walking distance to such and such and such, you are also saying, well, if you can't walk, it's not right for you. I'm not saying I agree with that. Don't shoot the messenger. This is just what I've been told that has happened in other states. Haven't seen it happen here in Oregon yet, but probably just a matter of time. So it is family children, mother-in-law suite. That's another one of those, having a second master bedroom. There's even some talk that calling it a master bedroom is a bit of a violation. Just saying, bedroom with attached bathroom, I guess probably the best way to go about it, or just simply what we do. If there's only one master bedroom, then we'll just let the pictures speak for themselves. We have pictures of the walk-in closet and the attached bathroom and all that good stuff. If there's a second one, which is really what you'd probably use mother-in-law suite to refer to, then we'll probably just say there's a second bedroom with attached bathroom, or something like that. Bachelor pad, I just put that one in there because I thought it was funny. I've been a bachelor. I've known plenty of bachelors as friends. I wouldn't want to advertise specifically to that group and say this is a great bachelor pad, but nonetheless, it is on there but because it does fall into that category of you kind of favoring one tenant or the other as far as what would be best for your unit. Saying no students, adults only, traditional couple, whatever that means anymore, mature, empty nesters. So no students. I see Alan had a question kind of referring to this. So if in Portland, apparently they haven't gone the extra mile like Eugene and or Corvallis. It might only be Eugene. Don't shoot me. Yeah, might be wrong. Jeez. I've gone the extra mile to say specifically in our city, students are a protected class. So why couldn't a landlord refuse to rent to students in, say, Portland or somewhere that hasn't passed a local thing like that? Well, yeah, it's not specific. So they went the extra mile to specifically spell it out. Most fair housing discrimination attorneys would probably argue they didn't need to, because if someone can prove that you're treating me differently simply because I am a student instead and that's the only reason, then they probably could have brought a successful fair housing discrimination case against you. I think with those cities, the reason that they felt they needed to make it more specific, I think is probably in the additional definitions that they added. So like with the Portland Area Rental Owners Association, if you're a member, you get free unlimited access to our landlord helpline. And the person 99% of the time, except for, if she's on vacation or something like that, that mans that for us is Tia. She's actually a landlord, also president of the Oregon Rental Housing Association, the state association out of Eugene. And so I do, talk to her quite a bit and stuff. And I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, and it's been a little while since that was passed, so my memory might be a little bit off on it, but essentially from what I remember, the real key to why they passed those locally wasn't because of landlords that just overtly said we don't rent to students, because for most attorneys, they felt, the state and or federal protected classes kind of covered that. The reason was more in the fine print, which was there were landlords that were basically making it to where they would be creating policies that didn't overtly say no students, but made it much more difficult to be a tenant of theirs if they happen to be a student. And so in the fine print in those areas, they kind of added specific things to that to make it to where you aren't able to create additional policies and kind of try to find your own little loopholes. So long explanation to say, technically on the surface of it, those locals really didn't have to pass the law. I would not advertise, I don't rent to students. I would not deny someone specifically because they're a student. But you can have additional requirements, of course. Like we have a student who can't prove that they have regular, housing income coming in every month, that we require, their parents or someone qualified to be a co-signer and sign on the dotted line that, hey, if they can't pay the rent, they're going to, right? So you can do things like that, just like I would with any other potential tenant that, couldn't show enough income, is, given that option. But no, yeah, the short answer is, they didn't need to pass those laws, and I definitely wouldn't say I don't rent to students. Let's see here. Kim asks, if I'm offering a houseboat for rent, may I legally have a statement of policy excluding children due to safety considerations? My official answer, Kim, is I don't know. And I would definitely run that by, I'm trying to think, would your insurance companies, the houseboat insurance companies, legal staff be the right ones to run it by? Or would a Oregon State practicing landlord attorney be the best one to run it by? You might try to run it by both. I would start with your insurance company. If you're renting it out, because that might be your crux. So there is room to where what am I trying to say? If your insurance said, no, our policy is, if there is a child on there and something happens to that child, we will not cover you, then I believe you should be able to make an argument that it would be unreasonable to require you to allow children, because the liability insurance to protect them and to make them whole, if there is some sort of claim or that involves the child, would be negated, then you might have an argument for it. I could see that. Full disclosure, I have never managed a houseboat, so I've not been forced to actually go down that road and look into it. But yeah, I would first start with my insurance company and their legal team and say, hey, what's the situation? I feel like I'm going to be violating fair housing, but I also feel like you guys would probably prefer I didn't rent to people with children, right? And unfortunately, it might also come back with, the answer might be, well, it would probably be discrimination. So technically you can't say no to children. And as your insurance company, you have a good point. Now we want all of those rails to be completely solid, instead of wire or something like that. I don't know. I haven't had to do it. I'm just making that up. Joe asks, is it considered discrimination to advertise through channels that are targeted to certain groups, even if the advertisers themselves comply with all requirements? For example, what if you only advertise on an online bulletin board for a local church that anyone can access on the internet? No, that is would not be considered discrimination. technically, there aren't rules on where you advertise, it's what's said in your advertisement. That's also something to where, it's, no, I won't go down that road. That's too much of a gray area. Yeah, there are no rules about where. So if your go-to every time is, no, I advertise at my church. That's it. Your advertising doesn't say anything about you have to be a member of this church in order to rent, it doesn't say have anything like that, or you have to be a member of this faith, it's just simply, you have your advertisement, you put it on the bulletin board at your church, or maybe let's go even farther than that. Let's say there's lots of different specific minority focused support groups and centers, work centers, things like that around the area, especially online, that have their own message boards. You can even go as far as, hey, if you're, maybe you're Hispanic and you're a member of some Hispanic based organization, trying to think of one that might be maybe Tucasa, right? They do a lot of things for the Hispanic group, and focused around helping them kind of get going in life, or start a small business if they want to, or stuff like that. You could absolutely just advertise there to start with, and just post your bulletin board. And even though it is a specific minority group or a church or something like that, there's nothing against that, as long as in your advertisement, nothing about it says you have to be a member here. And then, of course, obviously just good business practice. If you don't get any bites on that in the first couple of weeks, then you'll probably advertise it more widely elsewhere too. But yeah, sure. So shorter answer is no, there's no problem with that. Let's see here, Catherine. If you're renting a room in your house and you're a single woman, can you say the roommate has to be a woman? I will not answer your question right now, Catherine, because we are just a handful of slides away for me answering that for you. Hint, it is on the slide where I talk about exceptions. So shorter answer is yes, you can, but I'll talk about it in more detail. All right. How are we doing on time? 10:43. Oh. I just realized. Kind of loaded up. Okay. Yeah, because I think the city one was supposed to include that. All right, we'll see. Yeah, okay. Sorry, just talking to myself, admin stuff. You don't need to worry about that. All right, common violations. Let's see here. We're about 10:44. I think we should be fine to power through it. I think we'll probably be wrapped up probably by like 11:15. So unless I get like 10 messages from a bunch of you guys saying, oh, I absolutely need my 5-minute break. But my guess is most of the time, anytime I've actually done polls, people are always saying like, yeah, power through. Let's get us out of here a little bit early. So common violations: applying different policies, procedures, requirements, or standards to different tenants because of them being in a protected class. So you must apply everything to all tenants equally. Again, have a policies and procedures manual so you can refer back to it, so you don't accidentally treat someone differently than others. One here, most commonly violated during the application screening process. Good example, say you're doing a showing prospective tenant. While you're going through doing the showing, if you take my class, the class that I teach on advertising and the showings and following up and all that process, right, and marketing, one of the things I say is, even though that person that just wants to tell you their life story, no matter what you say, can feel like you might feel like they're a little bit annoying, I can tell you that's the best person to run into for a showing. Because if you, if you listen to my advice, ask your open-ended questions, hopefully you do get them to start spilling their guts and just telling you everything. If during that process they tell you something, right, that is something that will disqualify them, that doesn't meet your screening criteria, right? And let's say you've made sure they've seen your screening criteria already, or maybe they haven't yet, you want to point it out. After the end of that showing, they ask for an application because they want to apply, or ask how do they apply. You don't want to proceed to tell them, well, because of what you told me, it doesn't sound like you're going to be qualified, so I'm not going to let you apply. That's where you make the mistake, is now you made the decision for them. You said, I won't even let you apply because of that thing you told me about. You actually can't do that. Technically, your heart's in the right place. You want to save them their, $50 application fee, or if it's a couple, $100 worth of application fees or whatever. Maybe you're being honest with them. Hey, you remember you told me about that? You're probably it sounds like you're gonna be denied. So, but I won't take your application. That's where you cross the line. You can review your screening criteria with them. Let them know, hey, I remember you told me about this thing that happened. Here, look at, I just want to show you on the screening criteria right here. It sounds like, based on what you said, that because of this part on our screening criteria, you won't qualify. And then you proceed to let them know. It's up to you, though. If you still want to apply, you feel like you've got a good argument, something like that, for, who knows why. It doesn't really matter why they still want to apply. You can simply say, if you still want to apply, of course, we'll take your application, we'll do a screening. But do know you do risk those fees if you end up being denied. Well, technically, those fees are gone. It's non-refundable the moment you apply, but you guys get what I'm saying. You can advise them, you can let them know, you can point out your screening criteria, but if they say, I want to apply anyway, you have to take that application, screen it, and if it is the case, deny them. Or who knows, maybe there is more to the story than what they actually told you during the showing, and you end up approving them. Who knows? All right. I will say on that, if you're a small landlord where you have, one vacancy every couple years, then this won't really matter. Technically, within the city limits of Portland, there is an exemption where you can refuse to accept an application from someone that you had evicted or did a for-cause termination from one of your units that you manage within the last 12 months. So in that little carve out, which really is just going to apply for like larger management companies where you pretty much always have vacancies just on a regular monthly basis, something's being rented out, something's coming vacant, whatever. Then that might happen to where you evicted someone and they turn around and try to apply for one of your other units. You're like, no, because of your eviction there, we're not even going to accept your application. So there is a small exception like that for units within the city of Portland, but for the vast majority of situations and for the state as a whole, if a tenant wants to apply, you have to accept it, screen them, and if it is the case, deny them. Not returning calls or giving inaccurate information. So for rental units that are located within the city limits of Portland, you're actually required to return calls and everything on a first come, first served basis. But I will say that's always been my advice as a best practice, because it is your going first come, first serve, whether it's screening applications or returning voicemails for people that are interested, or returning emails or texts of people that are interested, anything like that. It is this surefire way to be able to protect yourself from potential accidental discrimination suits during this process. If you just pick and choose, and maybe you don't do it on purpose, maybe you're not intentionally avoiding all of the Hispanic ones, but in your process of just picking and choosing who you respond to and when, is somehow, some way, you ended up avoiding all the ones that were Hispanic in your random choices. And then somehow, some way, those multiples of those people found out about it and complained to Bully or HUD, or possibly it was a shopper. So one of the things is Bully and HUD, like I've referenced a couple of times, they have testers that will call and inquire about rental properties. Typically, they will have two people call you or email you even. They'll have one person that's whether it's through their accent or the words that they use or their name, or probably a combination of all of them. One of them will be obviously not a non-white American, or is obviously not that, and one that is obviously a white American. So, and if you happen to tell different information to the person that is obviously from a or belongs to some protected class, you could fail their test and be brought up on charges for fair housing discrimination violations. Geez, I cannot talk right now. Anyways, so they do have those shoppers out there. That can happen. Best to go respond to people first come, first serve. With that said, because this question always comes up when I teach this class, well, what if I've got like 5 applications and I'm done? Do I really have to get back to every single one, everyone else? No, you don't. As long as you can show that you did first come, first serve up to this point, and everyone that contacted you after that, you just ignored. So I go back to my kind of somewhat joke, but it's also true. You can have a bad business practice or bad customer service as long as you do that equally to everyone. So by cutting it off right there, has to do with time, and you're set there. All right. So yeah, so you can do that. I would argue just good business practice, probably still good to reach out to all of them. Who knows, maybe you've got another vacancy coming up that they can wait for or something like that. Let's see here. If you have any staff, make sure everyone is getting their information from the exact same location. Nowadays, if you have staff, odds are you've got some kind of online or electronic management software system. And so they can just go right there. And if anything's updated, like you lower the rent or something like that, it's all right there. Back when I first started my management company, before we had online management software, every morning I would have my front desk actually print off a sheet of all of our current vacancies that we have that day, and kind of a quick reference of what utilities aren't paid for, the rent amount, deposit, pet policy, all that good stuff, and print that off. And then if we had a change in the middle of the day, I'd have them print off new ones and replace the ones on everyone's desk. Let's see here. Create office policies so that all calls are returned within a reasonable amount of time, and on a first come first served basis. Let's see here. Keep detailed call logs with date and time of calls and notes on what was discussed. This is admissible in court. If you can defend yourself by having a handwritten call log. It's actually the one thing that I haven't converted to digital in my regular daily practice. I have one of those like half notebooks of line paper, spiral notebooks, line paper on my desk at all times. I have for a new day, I'll draw a line, put the date there. Any voicemails I get, I'll write down on there, and I'll mark them off when I've called them back, et cetera, et cetera. That works. And also, in addition to that, quite honestly, I try to push a vast majority of my communication, both with tenants and owners that hire me, to email format, so that way I have a nice written record of everything and who decided, who gave permission for who to do what and all that good stuff. Let's see here. Oh, I see a couple questions in the Q&A about you speaking one language and whether or not there's interpreter requirements and stuff. I'm going to dismiss those because I believe on the next slide I actually cover that. The Google Translator recommendation is a good option. Let's see here. Fred asks, we're renovating one of our units, and we have been contacted by people referred by our tenants about possible rental. We have not posted a notice of intent to rent, so I'm assuming we are under no obligation to discuss the unit availability with them. Correct. Yeah. There's actually two things to that. So you're not advertising publicly, and someone gets referred to you, or it could even be that someone sees you doing work on the property and just walked in from the street and said, "Hey, by chance, is this a rental that you're fixing up?" I've had it happen, right? So two things. One, no, you're not obligated to give them any information about the unit if you don't want to. As a good business practice, I would say, why not? Who knows? Maybe they will end up being qualified, and great. Now, if they're referred by one of your other tenants that you don't really like, and so you're probably a good assumption that if it's their friend, that they're probably very similar, then understandable. There's absolutely nothing that requires you to give them information at this time because you're not advertising it publicly or anything like that. I will also say, if you have a rental unit within the city limits of Portland, right, and you do not advertise it publicly, i.e. this scenario happens, then you are actually exempt from all the city of Portland screening requirements and advertising requirements. We have to give the, the 7-day notice of, hey, I'm advertising it. We won't start taking applications for this amount of time or whatever it is. You're actually exempt from that. So there's pluses and minuses to it. But as far as your actual question, Fred, no, you're not required to discuss the unit. You can simply say, yeah, we're not, it's not ready. We're not ready to advertise it or anything. To be honest, we haven't really thought about it yet. But when it does come up, we'll let so-and-so, the other tenant, know, or give us your information. We'll send you a link or something. But no, short answer is no, you don't. Is posting a personal social media ad for a form of advertising? I mean, you could make an argument. No, I'm going to say yes, it is. I'm just going to say yes, it is. I would say if I really thought it through, I might be able to make an argument for saying that if you post it on your private page, then if you post it on your private page, then that's not advertising it publicly. Well, I could see that argument. I could understand it, but I personally would not feel confident if that was my defense against a fair housing violation or against the violation having to do with that. So I would probably say, yeah, consider it a form of advertising, plain and simple. Sorry, I just had to check something on the class info here. Okay. Keep detailed call log, got that. Okay, cool. Let's see. Other common violations, steering. So I know if you're following along in the PDF, just so you know, it shows 26 total slides. We actually only have this one and 2 more as far as class content. Because for this grant and the schedule, it is just on all the fair housing and discrimination stuff. I will touch on reasonable accommodations a little bit, just kind of as far as what's protected about them. But I went ahead and in the slides that you get in the PDF, I went ahead and included, when I teach this as a 3-hour class, included the whole section on reasonable accommodations, just so you have the info. And so that way, just because it wasn't included in the Portland grant, you didn't get the information. Also, after the class, I'll field any questions on that as well. Oh, darn it, I lost my Zoom control. There it is. All right. Steering. What this is, common violation by landlords, is whether through your words or actions, suggesting that these types of units would be best for this tenant because of whatever their protected class is. So recommending that they rent a upstairs or a downstairs unit. Literally, if you have someone in a wheelchair roll into your office saying, hey, do you have any vacancies available? Can I see what you have available? You could be in violation of steering if you filter them out and you only show them options that are for downstairs units, which is different than if they specifically say, which is pretty much always the case, they specifically say, hey, do you have any downstairs ground level units that are available? If they ask that specific question, then by all means, show them only what they asked for. That's perfectly fine. If they just ask a general question, hey, what units do you have available? And you only show them the downstairs one, it could be considered steering. Now, odds are that tenant probably isn't going to get mad about it and sue you over it, but it's a good extreme to kind of, illustrate the point. The other area where I could definitely see, let's see here, Lacey asked, does your office have to be wheelchair accessible? That has more, that's I would refer mostly to building code on that. So there's ways for your office and stuff to be grandfathered in. With that said, if you are a property management company and your office is not wheelchair accessible, then make sure if you have any tenants with disabilities to where they might be in a wheelchair, make sure they are well aware of what you are willing to do to accommodate that, which would be, well, if your office isn't wheelchair accessible, okay, hey, if you are need to come pay rent and you have to come to our office to do it, go to the parking lot, give us a call, we will come to you and get it from you, right? As simple as that, and you should be fine. So I would refer you to building code stuff for your local area. But as far as landlord tenant law stuff is concerned, it all depends. If you do have an office that isn't wheelchair accessible, then you need to make sure you make an accommodation, which actually kind of is a reasonable accommodation, actually falls into that category, an accommodation for that tenant so that their disability doesn't make it to where they aren't able to access all the same services, I guess, as other tenants, which would be, if they need to come into the office to pay rent at some point, then very simple solution. Hey, give us a call. We'll come out of the office, out to your car and collect it from you. So not only do you not have to try and get into a building that it wasn't made for a wheelchair, but you don't even have to get out of your car. We're actually going to make it easier for you than other tenants, right? Let's see here. She'll ask, right? Yeah, yep. I see your question, Nicole, on languages. It's third bullet point on this slide. I promise I will get there, guys. Hold your questions on languages. Michelle asks, if you have an upstairs unit that has incredibly steep stairs, can you mention steep stairs when advertising the unit? Absolutely. Absolutely. That is a great example, Michelle. You can say this has steep stairs, or heck, I've had one of those houses to where it has the garage on the main level or on the ground level, and the second floor is actually the main level of the housing and where the front door is. And so not only were they steep stairs, I've had the one I'm thinking of, I think I counted it one day and it had it was 50 something stairs, right? It was a little ridiculous. It was a hindrance. Even, people that didn't have disabilities or perfectly 100% healthy physically would not rent that unit because of the stairs. So yes, you could absolutely include a picture of them, maybe from a side angle if they're really steep. You can mention that they are really steep stairs. You can mention how many stairs they are. You could even mention, hey, this is a historic 100-year-old home, and the stairs, not only are they steep, they're actually really skinny too. Like you're like the front half of your foot fits on it. All of that is factual information you can put. Where you would make a mistake and be in violation, Michelle, is if you made the next step and said, because of there being steep stairs, this would not be ideal for someone with any kind of physical disability, right? That's where you make that extra step to crossing the line. But everything before that, where you're just giving the information, let them decide if it's right for them and their situation or not. Technically, if someone in a wheelchair says, I don't care that it's an upstairs unit, I want it, then you rent it to them. It's there's their issue to figure out. Let's see, Mariana asked, so would you need to accommodate everyone by picking up rent in a parking lot per fair housing? No. So your policy in that example I was talking about, your policy is you have to get it into the office. That's your policy of you drop it. You've got a drop box they have to put it in. They have to bring it to the front desk to get, if they want their receipt not emailed or mailed to them later, whatever those policies are, that's your policy. You are making an exception. And this is actually a perfect segue into a reasonable accommodation, which is a legal term for someone saying, since I have a disability, I need you to make this change to either your policies, which would be this case, procedures, or change to the property. And by law, in order for me to fairly ask you to do that or tell you to do that, it has to be considered reasonable, i.e. someone in a wheelchair can't say, because of my disability, I want to rent your 120-year-old home, but I need you to actually widen all the doorways so my wheelchair can fit. That would not be reasonable. But someone who is in a wheelchair and you have a property management company that is not wheelchair accessible, them saying, hey, I understand you have this policy that we have to get it to this drop box or get it to your office. Being I am in a wheelchair, would you make an exception just for me to come out and actually pick it up from me? Then yes, you can do that. You're not violating anything by not doing it for people that aren't in a wheelchair. But if you do it for this person in a wheelchair or with a physical disability where they can't make it into your building, then I would say you do need to do it for every tenant that has a physical disability that would make it hard for them to go into the building, which I assume you would anyway. So, but short answer to your question is no, you don't have to do it for just everyone at that point. You can have your set policy and then say, well, if you have a physical disability, then you qualify for our, curbside rent pickup service. And you can even give it a fancy name if you want. All right. Let's see here. Oh, that was other steering. So I've had this one actually happen. It just sometimes naturally happens, especially in like larger complexes, sometimes areas of town. There'll be like an area of town to where a certain nationality just seems to gravitate to that area, right? It just happens. I think it happened. I mean, obviously way back in the day, there was actual steering that happened. This is why we have these laws, to where that was mandated that, hey, if you're part of this minority group, this is where you can live if you want to live in our city. Now it will naturally happen and I think my guess, because I've had this happen in like 100-unit apartment complex we had, to where there's one side of the complex, a couple of the buildings, probably about like 20 of the units, that just over a few years, just all of a sudden was just all Hispanic, right? Just naturally happened. And in that case, it happened because as the unit next door came up, the people that lived there, they told their friends and family who happen to also be Hispanic, hey, there's a place right next door. It'd be great if we were neighbors. And then they move in and it just naturally happens. What we couldn't do is if someone came into that office and said, hey, what units do you have available at this complex? And they're Hispanic, we show them all the units and we take them around. If they ask the question, hey, do you have any other Hispanic tenants here? I would like to live near them. If that's the case, then you can say, oh yeah, what seems like naturally there seems to be a lot of people of Hispanic origin in this area of the place. Perfectly fine. But without them asking, you show them everything. Do not ever say, hey, you might like it over here better, because there's a lot of people that speak your language, right? Let's see here. Question: incredibly steep stairs may be an issue of safe habitability. Do they meet code? Where does it leave you if an injury occurs because of these stairs that you know are incredibly steep? Fair concern. If you are concerned about that, I would run it by your property insurance company and their legal department. That would be my first go-to. Possible if it's incredibly steep stairs. My guess is if it was built that way and they're not that way because of them like breaking down in some way, then probably good chance it's kind of grandfathered in. I mean, if someone hurts themselves on your property, no matter what, you're liable. It doesn't matter. I mean, whether the stuff is faulty or not, you're going to end up being liable if they want to make you liable. So that's why we're required to have property insurance. That's why someone breaking into your home through a skylight, falls on a knife, can sue you and win. That has happened. I think it actually happened here in Oregon, if I remember right. I think like 8 years ago or something like that. Anyways, let's see here. Language. We've already gotten a few questions on that, so I know you guys are itching to hear about this one. So if you can't, it would be discrimination if you refuse to rent to a tenant because they speak a different language than you do. That does not mean, with that said, that's only if you refuse. You are not required to provide a translator. You are not required to translate your forms. You can have your forms in your language as a landlord, and it is on the tenant to get them translated or on the tenant to bring their own translator. I can say in my experience, let's see, the two non-English speaking groups that I'm thinking of that are most common that we end up dealing with would be Russian and Hispanic. And I think pretty much every time that has happened, they have brought a family member. Lots of times it's a child. or a neighbor or a friend with them to translate, and they take care of it. There are also organizations, I know for sure in the Portland metro area. Obviously, if you're joining this class from other parts of Oregon that might have, might not have as much of a population, these services be a little more limited. But for sure in like Portland metro area, there's plenty of places to where they're actually support organizations for those minority groups, and they will actually free of charge provide a translator to meet them at a place and help them. So not on you. You can have all of your forms, your lease, and obviously you speaking in your language. It is 100% on the tenant to handle all translation. So that's what the law is. Now, good business practice, definitely like the suggestions that I saw a couple people give. Google Translate, totally fine to use with, make sure I will give the caveat or caution you. It's not always right. Actually, quite honestly, sometimes if you're just really bored and you want to entertain yourself, have Google translate something from English to another language, and then copy that and have it translate it from that language back to English. 90% of the time it does not come back the same. So yeah, so it's not 100%. So like for instance with Google Translate, I would not use Google Translate to translate an entire official form or to translate my lease, but totally fine to try and use it as just a way to communicate with them, like while you're doing the showing or talking about repairs or doing an inspection, stuff like that. Yeah, so you can totally that is definitely helpful. But if you're going to actually translate your forms into a different language, I would have an actual live translator do it. Like I said, there's certain organizations that would probably offer to do it for free. There's a decent chance if you go to some of the local colleges, someone later in their years in a degree that has a emphasis on that language, they might be willing to do it for you for free, something like that. So you should be let's see. Oh yeah, Patrick, take care of that. So yeah, you can make sure you have it done by a person. I don't think the technology is there yet for me to trust it for a legal form. Totally fine for just basic communication. Let's see here. Florian asks, are there limitations on what your language means? Could I just advertise in Spanish, Russian, etc.? As far as I'm aware, there aren't any limitations on that. There is absolutely nothing that says you have to advertise in the most popular or most widely used language in your area. If there was a law on it, I'm envisioning that's essentially kind of how it would be worded, but there isn't anything on that. If you speak Spanish or you speak Russian, or also you speak English, and you create your advertisement in that language, and that's how you advertise, that is perfectly fine. Because someone of another, as long as you don't say or have a policy or commit any actions that would make people feel like, oh, you denied me or didn't allow me to apply for your place because I don't speak that language. So like, for instance, if you post an advertisement in that's in Spanish, 100% in Spanish, as a good business practice, I would say maybe post multiple advertisements or have a translation on there or a link to a translation or something like that. But you don't have to. If you have it fully in Spanish, me as an English speaking person that doesn't speak Spanish, if I saw that advertisement, I got it translated, and I saw, oh, I do like that place, I want to apply, you would have to let me apply, and you could not hold it against me that I don't speak Spanish. You're just not required to put things in my language. That's on me. So it goes, as far as I'm aware, the law definitely, it goes both ways. All right. Excuse me. Clicker. There we go. When is it legal to discriminate? So there are, like I said, let's see here. Yeah. Sorry. All right. Sorry. I want to answer someone that needed to leave real quick. Let's see here. When is it legal to discriminate? Pets. Technically, if it is a pet, you can have any rules you want, including I won't take that pet. Now, before anyone asks, well, what about therapy animals and assistance animals and blah, blah, blah. Technically, by law, they're not pets. So my statement stands. For pets, you can discriminate all you want. That is perfectly fine. Have any rules you want. Obviously, if they have an assistance animal, therapy animal, I have a basically when I add going through all of the therapy animal stuff and assistance animal stuff, fair housing stuff, this turns into a 3-hour class. So it's a big subject, but in general, yes, if they have one and that animal does not have a history of committing injuries to other people or a history of damaging property, then you got to accept it. You can't charge them deposit. You can't charge them pet rent. It is what it is. By law, they're not actually considered pets though. Anything that is, if it's all the others, the ones that are not said, they don't have a medical professional saying they need it, those are considered pets. You can have any rule you want, age, breed, size, or just simply, nope, not allowed. Are there limits as to what is legally considered an assistant / support animal? So in in that class, when I teach about that, excuse me, if I teach about that that part of the class, one of the jokes I make just to drive home this point is that technically they could have a therapy dolphin. Granted, you wouldn't be required to put in a giant pool or even allow that. It'd be pretty unreasonable. But no, there's actually nothing in the law that specifies what can or cannot be a assistant supportive therapy animal. I'll just leave it at there because that really is as straightforward as it gets. I go into a little more detail later and some examples of what they can do. Like you wouldn't ever know it, but miniature horses, they have very well actually specifically trained miniature horses to be actually just like an assistance animal, like a seeing eye dog or someone, you know, that helps open doors and stuff like that. So there's more than you would think that could qualify, but as far as the law is concerned, it could be anything. Let's see here. You could have another way to discriminate is based on age, and also technically this would also be discriminating against having children, is if your property is a 55 or 62 and older housing unit or place to where it's basically, you know, retirement age and stuff like that. I recently looked at the possibility of turning one of my clients, they have one of those near downtown Portland single family homes to where it's set up to where they're renting out, I think it's like four or 5 units that are all in the same place. And we looked into, well, could we have this small place actually turned into a 55 or 62 and older, you know, property? And the answer is yes. It's actually pretty easy to do. You don't even have to go through any application process or anything like that. All you have to do is make sure that 80% of the residential units. So if you've got 10 units, then at least 8 of those units at all times need to make sure they qualify for this requirement of all residents being 55 or 62 and older, whichever one you pick as your policy. And on top of that, the other requirement is that at all times you need to have proof that at least 80% meet that, which of course, if you're doing things properly as a landlord, you have copies of everyone's picture ID as part of the application process. So therefore you do have that proof and you're able to do that. And now you're able to advertise. If you're if anyone in your household is under the age of 55 or 62, you don't qualify to live here. One that was asked about previously, if the owner lives in a unit with some shared indoor common space. So real quick, just so you guys know, the 2 people that posted questions, you have questions about the pet stuff and the therapy animals and whatnot. I will answer that, but let me finish this slide and the next one and kind of close out the class for people. And then I'll answer that as part of my end of class Q&A session. So I'm not ignoring you, but I'm just going to wait a little bit. Other exemption, if the owner, and this was asked about, someone asked as a single woman, if I rent out bedrooms in my home, am I allowed to say I will only rent to other females? The answer is yes, actually you can. It is one of the few areas where you can legally discriminate if you have a reason. So, and if you share indoor common space. So if you are in one unit of a 2-unit duplex and they are physically separated units, which means you can't pass from one unit to another inside, okay? If that's the case, then this wouldn't apply to you. But if you are renting out rooms in your home, or you're renting out the downstairs of your home and there's no physical separation other than maybe a door, then it does. But you have to have a reason, like for instance, the single woman only renting to other women, obviously it's for safety, right? What you wouldn't be able to do is, if you're a man, let's say, or really doesn't matter, man or woman, you wouldn't be able to say, well, I only want to rent to people that are of my same religious background, or, are a member of the same church or something like that. It would have to be like based on a reason like safety. Sex is also another thing. Like, for instance, if you have multiple bedrooms that you're renting out individually, you could say, hey, since these 2 bedrooms share this one bathroom, then those 2 bedrooms always have to be rented out to 2 people of the same sex. And then these bedrooms over here share this same bathroom, so it has to be rented out to members of the same sex, which then is just dictated where if they're both vacant, it could be rented out to anyone. The first person to rent it, whether they're male or female, then that would dictate what the other one has to be rented at. Don't ask me how the complexities of what they identify as come into play here. I mean, since gender identity is a protected class at the state level, I guess you would have to just kind of go with it. But yeah, I haven't had to come across that one yet. But I guess to be safe, I guess I would just go with whatever they identify as, which who knows if that would cause issues with the other tenant. Who knows? Let's see here. Shared indoor common space. Yeah, so basically like based on safety. Also could be that, hey, you could even, I believe you are even fine to take it one step further, both safety and not wanting to try to avoid relations between tenants and things like that, to where I believe you'd even be able to say, as a single straight woman, I only want single straight women. So basically you're saying I don't want people that I would have to feel like they could possibly turn into a sexual predator inside of my home. So I don't want anyone that would identify as someone that is attracted to women, right? However that goes. So main thing though is to lean on for that exemption though is the safety aspect. And again, kind of wrap this up. The main 2 simple rules to follow that I've pretty much been beating into you for this whole class in different ways is have a detailed policy procedures guide or manual so that you can ensure that you really are treating all tenants exactly the same. And again, you don't have to be nice. You could be a curmudgeon. You could be difficult to deal with. You could have annoying policies, as long as they're the same for everyone. You don't pick and choose who you're nice to. Stick to providing information. Let the tenants determine what is best for them. So you just give the facts. They will figure out if it's something they do or don't like, or do or don't want. All right. And then the person in the chat that was from mediation or knew that my phone number on here is wrong, if you would you mind reposting that in the chat for me? Or Patrick, if they don't right away, maybe you could scroll up and copy and paste it here for me. This is something the city of Portland wanted me to make sure I was advertising. Oh, there we go. Sandy just posted it in there, the 595-4890. Oh, so I just got a 9 wrong on that one. So we can update that. I think if I got this in a PDF, I think I can update it. But if still, if you do have one, you guys can quickly email me. Go ahead and do that too. Or yeah, you can literally just reply to the class notifications that you got for this class, and it'll end up getting to me. Anyways, if any landlords out there, I think pretty much all landlords taking this class for the most part. Every once in a while we'll have tenants. But tenants can also initiate this. The city of Portland has been, for the last couple of years, has been funding a landlord tenant mediation pilot project. And that's been going gone through Resolutions Northwest. All their information is on the screen there. Also, it's in the PDF printer-friendly version of all these slides. Obviously, substitute the proper phone number, replacing the 3 with a 9. Yes, if you have any issues, I will say if this turns into a mandated requirement through the eviction process, if they do it like they do down in Marion County, to where it is mandated, but it does not extend the time it takes to evict a tenant by any amount of time. It's done the day of the hearing, right there as part of the hearing process. Then I'm totally in favor of it. Quite honestly, as part of my business as a property manager with IRC Real Estate and Property Management, I do eviction processing, to where, I'm a little bit cheaper option than hiring an attorney for, the 90% of evictions that are not terribly difficult, and don't necessarily require an attorney. And in doing that, easily about 90+% of my evictions end in a stipulated agreement, which is we reach some sort of terms, some sort of agreement where, hey, you waive your right to a trial, tenant, and you agree to do this, this, and this. And if you do that, then I'll dismiss this eviction case and we move on. Lots of times it's just, hey, if you move out in the next, 3 to 6 weeks, which is the earliest I'll get from this point to the point of hiring a sheriff to remove you, then I'll drop the case. Lots of times it's that. But mediation can definitely help. There's no attorneys that come in. It's kept confidential unless you guys come to an agreement for the courts to see. And it's literally, there's one impartial, independent person who is not supposed to take sides and is just there to make sure that each side gets their chance to talk. And it does, and hopefully do their best to make sure it doesn't divulge into just a yelling match or an argument, and that they try to kind of guide it of, okay, tenant, we understand, or landlord, they'll say things like this to each of you. We understand that this is what your frustration is. We get that. What could happen to make it better? Like, they'll actually ask prodding questions like that to try and guide you guys to a point of, okay, instead of just airing your grievances, let's start talking about what could be good next steps that you might both agree to, right? So reach out to them, definitely try it out. Personally, I've, lots of times I'm able to, resolve things with eviction tenants on my own, because that's just, I've got a lot of practice at it. It's probably my least favorite part of my job, but I seem to have a knack for it. I probably in another life could be a mediator for Resolutions Northwest, quite honestly. But nonetheless, use them. It helps out, and it's just cheaper, easier, and less stressful for everyone if we're able to reach an agreement like that, and a stipulated agreement. Last slide there. Keep this information, the rental services help desk for the city of Portland Housing Bureau contacts. If you have any rental properties within the city limits of Portland, obviously they want me to make sure you guys have their information, so they are paying for this class, of course. If you do have properties within the city limits of Portland and you have questions of, I've read the laws on it, I'm not quite sure how my situation applies, reach out to them. Funding wise, they are only given the budget, I believe, to be open. I want to say it's only like 3 days a week or something like that. So there's a very good chance that you're not going to hear back from them that same day. But do reach out to them. Part of you paying that rental registration fee every year in the city of Portland is paying for that office and for you to help out and get help there if you need it. So, all right. I know we've got a few questions here. Terry, I did see yours. I saw that. I'll get to it. I just want to close this out in case people need to take off. If you're wanting continuing education credits, I can't see it. Oh, I see. If you want continuing education credits, please do an end of class check-in in the webinar chat. That's name as appears on license number, and broker affiliation. Also, depending on which system you signed up through, it might be immediately after the class, it might be 24 hours later. You should be getting a follow-up email with a couple very important links in there. One of them is a link the city requires for reporting for this. It's a anonymous survey for you to give your demographics so that the city can track that for their grants, as well as just information on the class, content, me as a speaker, all that good stuff, and it stays anonymous. That's part of the reporting for the grant that helps us get these renewed the next year, or possibly get additional class topics added and additional classes added, things like that. Also, another link in there. If you enjoyed the class, you got what you needed out of it. And then one of the best things you can do, aside from just coming to future classes or bringing someone else to future classes, is actually leave us a 5-star Google review. That's where it helps us the most online. And so one of those links will be in there for you guys to do that. All right. I'm going to go through. If you guys don't want to stick around and learn from other people's questions, you are welcome to take off. We'll get those CE credits going, get out the door typically within a day or so. And as well as recording for this typically within 1 to 2 days, depending on upload times and things like that. Sometimes things get delayed, I guess. I don't know. I'm getting old in my age when it comes to technology stuff. Okay. Let's see here. Got that. All right. So questions, Terry, before I lose yours. Oh, Alex, I saw yours about the certificate. If you need a certificate, a CE certificate, that was one of the extra things. If you go ahead, just email us, just reply to one of the class reminder emails, whichever system you sign up through, and I'll get to us and I can get you in contact with Patrick, our admin, and he'll get a certificate over to you. Let's see, Terry asked, if someone is first to respond to my ad, but they live elsewhere and can't see it until next Saturday, do you have to hold acceptance for them? Not necessarily. It depends on what your policies are. If you have a policy, as long as you hold all people to this, that they have to view the unit before you allow them to apply, you can do that as long as you apply it equally to everyone. Which within my company, we put a lot of pictures on there. And because of that, we get plenty of people from out of state that'll rent from us because they know, well, yeah, there's not going to be a surprise. That is accurate of what they're going to come into and see. So we're fine with it. We allow people to rent, fill out an application. But yeah, for your specific question, if you get in contact with them via email or phone and they can't see it till next Saturday, someone else looks at it prior to next Saturday and they apply, then you take that application that you got first, and that's the one you screen. Tough noogies. The other people, if they wanted to, if your policy is they have to see it, then that's just tough. If they can't see it sooner, then that's on them. If your policy is, hey, you don't have to see it to apply, then that's also on them that they weren't willing to apply without seeing it, and they can't see it till Saturday. None of those are your choices of making a decision for them, essentially. So in my opinion, no, it wouldn't be an issue. So got that. Yeah. All right. Next. All right. Some questions in the Q&A. Florian asks, does the pet policy have to be consistent, or can you allow a 60-pound dog for one tenant, but not for another for any reason? Yes and no. I would not say you can have those different rules for different tenants for any reason. You would have to have some reasoning. So you could have a policy of we do not allow any dogs under or over 50 pounds unless that dog is at least 5 years old and has a completely clean and positive track record from all of your previous landlords and renters since you've had that dog. Like you could have something like that where there's a qualifier that has more to do with the dog. What you want to avoid as far as the any reason part is possibly just telling one tenant just because of them, nope, you can't have your dog, but oh yeah, you over there that has the exact same dog, the exact same size, you can have it. You need to make sure you have specific reasons if you're going to do that. The other thing that you can do is you can have different pet policies for different properties as well. Like if I've got a property that's all carpet and tile, probably not going to care about the size of the dog. I'll care about the age because I want to make sure they're potty trained. Or if I have something that has historic, like old school hardwood floors, I might be a lot more strict and say for that property, no. It's got to be a tiny dog where the weight is not going to cause deep gouges. It'll be like a scratch that can be buffed, right? So you can do that. I would avoid saying, because of you as a tenant, you can't have the dog, but this tenant can have that same dog. That's where I would be worried. Can you refuse a specific breed of dog? In general, for your pet policies, you can make up any rules you want. You can simply say only these breeds are allowed, only these breeds are not allowed. Any size and weight. You can require vaccination histories, you can require licensing, all of that stuff. My guess is your question was more specifically to what about if it's they're asking for a reasonable accommodation for you to allow their therapy animal, and can I deny a therapy animal based on the breed of dog? In general, no. With that said, I have definitely heard of and know of management companies that if the owner's property insurance company has a dangerous breeds list, to where if there is a dog of a breed that is on that list on the property that commits something that could trigger some liability incident, then it could negate your insurance coverage. They have I haven't seen it tested in court, but they feel confidently enough to refuse that request for that breed, but still say, we approve your request to waive our no pet policy so that you can have a therapy dog. It just can't be that dog of that breed because it would negate our property insurance or liability insurance, and that would be considered not reasonable. So there is a possibility there. Be careful though, because if your insurance has an option to where there's some kind of rider that maybe the tenant can get, and then all of a sudden it's covered, then that's not much of an argument anymore. But also at the same time, a good tenant attorney could probably make a pretty strong argument of it's not a hugely unreasonable for you to switch insurance companies if there's not a major difference in cost, who knows? But that's about the only area that I've heard of to where management companies that I know of are willing to take the risk at least. Let's see here. Angela asks, what is the minimum annual rent increase allowed by law for Portland downtown? I think what you mean is what's the maximum rent increase allowed? The minimum annual rent increase allowed is 0%. Technically, you could go negative and even lower rent. They'd be fine with that. I assume you meant what is the maximum? So for the city of Portland, it's 10%, and it doesn't mean you can't raise it above 10%. Like, unless one of the current laws being debated at the state is passed, it'll change it. So if you know about that, don't bite my head off for using this as an example. Currently, the state law maximum rent increase is 14.6%. That is a hard law. If you raise your rent by 14.60001%, it is illegal. You owe the tenant the mandated fine in that law, which is, what is it, 2 times rent, I believe. Plus legal fees if you need to. And also your rent increase is completely invalid, doesn't even count, right? For the city of Portland rule, it's 10%. But you can still raise it above 10% because the state law allows you to raise as much as 14.6. The only thing that happens is if you raise your rent by 10% or more in the city of Portland, then the tenant has, it's a 90-day notice. The tenant has, which is 90-day notice across the whole state. The tenant has 45 days after you serve that rent increase notice of 10% or more for a unit in the city of Portland. They have 45 days to tell you, because of your rent increase, I am going to move and I'm requesting the relocation fee, at which point you owe them the city of Portland relocation fee. And it's based off of bedrooms as far as the amount and stuff like that. If those 45 days comes and goes and they don't say they're going to move out because of the rent increase and they don't move out, then your rent increase goes into play. You don't pay a relocation fee and there's no problem. So the limit you're thinking about in Portland is 10%, but understand it's not set. Like if raising your rent by 12%, it's still a good deal when the tenant goes out shopping, then there's a decent chance they're not going to move because of it if they can afford it, because otherwise they have to downgrade what they live in, and therefore they're not going to ask you the relocation fee. You don't have to pay it, and you're fine. But the state limit is a set law. You cannot go above that. And thank you everyone for the kind words. Appreciate that. Looks like let's see. So yes, Terry, yeah, with Senate Bill 611, that rent increase cap looks like it's probably moving forward. They just recently removed the portion of it that would have made the state relocation fee 3 times rent. They removed that section. We got that negotiated out in committee recently. And so that's going to remain at 1 times rent. But yes, more than likely that rent increase cap that's currently being debated, which is I believe you're right. I believe it's Senate Bill 611. I might be wrong, Patrick. If I'm wrong on that, please post the right one. It would limit it. I think it puts a maximum cap of like 8% across the state, but they've toyed around with different percentages and stuff as it's being debated. So yeah, what I do know is that the relocation fee of 3 times rent got removed very recently. And as of right now, the bill hasn't been killed and is still moving forward and has a good chance of being passed in some form. So not what you want to hear, but is what it is. Let's see here. Maybe you covered this and I missed it, but can you ask for their paperwork for a emotional support animal? Yeah, so that would be covered kind of that extra hour if I was teaching that full class. But short answer is yes. You can ask them to fill out your own paperwork. You just can't require that you fill out your own paperwork. Like go to portlandarearoa.com, go to our form store. We actually have a reasonable accommodation request form that the tenant can fill out and give to you, and includes them signing a medical release so that their medical professional has permission to talk to you and confirm that they are disabled. And yes, they do need that therapy animal or whatever. So yes, but you can ask for paperwork and you can verify it and make sure it's not fraudulent. Yep. Joe asks, is it considered a rent increase if you have a gap in tenants? For example, a tenant lease ends, the property is vacant for a month, then you start a new lease with new tenants. In almost all cases, you have no limit on how much you raise the rent in between tenancies. So during a turnover, which is what you're talking about, Joe. The one exception to that is state law SB 608, which is actually one of the classes the city of Portland grant actually pays for. So we'll probably have that one coming up sometime in the near future. But state law SB 608, one of the things that it states is if you exercise your right within that state law to give a no cause notice within the first year of occupancy, then the state rent increase limit still applies during turnover. Outside of that, if you do a for-cause termination because the tenant committed a violation, or you use one of the qualifying state reasons outlined in SB 608 to ask a tenant to move out after they live there 1 full year, that is not their fault, then you can raise the rent as much as you want in between tenancies. Totally fine. The one caveat is if you give a no cause notice, the tenant didn't do anything wrong, and you told them they have to move out within the first 12 months of them living there, then you are limited to the rent increase, the state rent increase limit for that. For the city of Portland relocation fee, that 10% does not apply in any way under any circumstances for the turnover period. Thank you for the kind words. All right, looks like just a few more quick questions and we'll get you guys out of here. See, Justin asks, with regards to someone in PDX not renewing their lease, but want to go month to month for 1 additional month after a rent raise, do they pay the raised rent amount for the month to month? Yes, they do. So for that rent increase, the relocation fee ordinance, right, where I was just talking about answering one of the other questions to where that you give a rent increase in Portland that say is more than 10%, right, is 10% or more. And within the 45 days, they tell you, well, that is because of your rent increase, we are going to move. And so we need the relocation fee. You then turn around, you pay them that relocation fee. And they technically, one of the things when the law was first passed, they didn't have this, but when I was on, or not when, I still am, when after it was passed, as one of the recommendations that came from us, the Rental Services Committee, is pointing out, wait a minute, technically the way this law was originally written, a tenant could say, I'm moving, get the relocation fee, and then just never move. And there's technically nothing that said a landlord could do anything about that, because it didn't require them to give you a move out notice. It just required them to tell you they intend to move. And so what happened is they instituted basically a 6-month deadline. So from the time their rent increase takes effect. So technically from the time you serve your 90-day rent increase notice, it'll be 9 months later. They have until then to actually give you their move out notice saying, here's the date I am moving out. And then if they don't, by law, they owe that money back to you, becomes a non-rent tenant debt, give them a reasonable amount of time to pay. If they don't, you serve a 1430 termination notice saying you got 14 days to pay, or on the 30th day it's terminated. And if they don't do either one, or move out by the 30th day, if they don't do either one, on the 31st day, you can file your eviction in the local county court. So, also for your specific question, yes, during the whole time that rent increase still counts at the 90 days. If they move out before it, great. Obviously, they don't have to pay. They don't have to pay that rent increase. If they don't, and they're still there after that 90 days and the rent increase takes effect, they are required to continue to pay the higher rent until they find a place, until they actually move. Yep, it still counts. Let's see here. Relocation fee, is it for 1 month's rent, or is it the flat $3,000 for a 1-bedroom 630 square foot apartment? It depends. Throughout the entire state of Oregon, the state relocation fee, okay, which is which is paid if you ask a tenant to move out after they live there a full year for one of the 6 qualifying reasons established in SB 608 that are not the fault of the tenant, so they're not being terminated because they're committing a violation, then you owe the 1 month's worth of rent relocation fee from that state law. If your rental property is within the city limits of Portland, then there is the city relocation fee that you could possibly owe, which I believe is the one you're referencing, that doesn't have anything to do with the square footage. It just has to do with the number of bedrooms, right? And if you happen to do something like you're given a no cause notice or something like that, and it triggers both relocation fees, the state and the city one, then there's basically fine print in the administrative rules that makes it to where they don't stack on top of each other. You just have to pay the one that is the most. And the way it's really worded, because the city of Portland one is typically going to be higher than the state one, is that if you have to pay the state relocation fee, then whatever you owe as a city of Portland relocation fee, you can deduct the state relocation fee from that, and whatever is left is the amount you pay is now your new city of Portland relocation fee. Basically, a lot of fine print legalese to say you pay the higher one, and that's the only one you pay. You don't pay both. Kyle asks, creating an addendum and adding pet rent on a no pet unit. Okay, does that count to the state limit? For rent increases? Yes, it does. Anything with the word rent on it is going to count for that. Yeah, Kyle. Yeah, whether you separate it out or not. I think pet rent, you definitely wouldn't be able to make an argument there. If you had storage rent, or maybe parking space rent, to where to where they pick out a separate storage unit that's on the property and rent that, you could definitely make an argument for that not counting. But for the most part, if the word rent is in it, it's going to be considered to count towards the total. Yeah. What if the rent renewal was sent or received 1 day late? Would that make a difference? The rent renewal? No, I see what you mean, Justin. Yeah, on the month to month, that converting month to month and whatnot. Yeah. No, unfortunately, it wouldn't make a difference. And the reason being is also with state law, SB 608, this passed 6 years ago or so. One of the things it did was it made it to where no matter what your lease fine print says about the end of the lease term, no matter what it says, if no paperwork is done, it is considered to automatically turn into a month-to-month agreement with all the other terms of the lease applying. And so Technically, when you receive the signed renewal paperwork, whether it's, month to month or fixed term, whatever, really doesn't change anything. It is assumed by state law that from the time that first one expired to the time the new one was signed, that in that interim time, whether it was one day or multiple months, or even years, technically, during that interim time, everything about the previous lease that expired still 100% applies, except for the fixed term part is just now considered month to month. So I think that answers your question. I think. And Angela asks, is the relocation fee tax deductible for the landlord? My official answer is I have no idea. I'm definitely not a tax professional. In my associations, we try like once a year or so to have, like, typically in the summer months, because typically business tax and stuff we're doing later in the year, but we try to have an accountant come in and teach those kind of classes that are tax based for landlords. It's definitely not my purview. My general assumption, just being a small business owner, like I said, definitely run this by a tax accountant, but don't take my word for it. But my assumption, just as a small business owner, is that it would be considered an expense, a business expense of doing an expense of doing business, and it would be deducted off of your gross income on your taxes. But like I said, very big caveat, don't trust me on that. I'm definitely not a tax professional. Run it by your tax accountant. We tried broaching that subject when debating this law, the relocation fee ordinances at the Rental Services Commission at the city level, and legal city staff and the legal team definitely made us aware that, yeah, when it comes to tax code, being it's a mix of state and federal, it's not even something that they could say for sure that, oh yeah, landlords will be able to deduct these relocation fees, or oh no, they definitely won't, because it definitely the answer varies based on your situation, your filing status, and all that good stuff. So the real answer, Angela, I don't know. All right, looks like that's all the questions. Cool. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. And like I said, check out the websites for the events calendar, so you can check out all of our upcoming classes. Like I think a week from now, we have one coming up that goes over a lease and all the possible addendums that you could use for that, and their most common ones. And then I think about 8 or 9 days from now is our class that we have every month on best practices and laws that apply when trying to sell a property that has a residential tenant living in it, what your options are if you need to get them out of there, and working with them and negotiating with them and all that good stuff. So keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, thank you very much, everyone. I'll see you at future classes.